Hey there, Greg Marchand here with a virtual instructor-led training program brought to you by the Service Sales Academy. In this episode, we've got another technical knowledge for service advisors, this time on parking brakes. This sounds so simple, but when you start looking at parking brakes, you quickly realize, boy, it's not all that simple at all. So we're just going to give you a real high-level synopsis of how 3 different types of parking brakes operate, what goes wrong, and what a customer is going to notice. All of this is going to make you a better salesperson, all right? Because you're going to have the confidence and it's actually going to make your job easier, and who doesn't want that? Do you have to have technical knowledge? This came up in a conversation I had recently. Do you have to have technical knowledge to sell service? No, you don't. If you're an absolute sales rock star and you've got the personality and the charisma to pull it off. But it certainly does make things more comfortable, and it makes things a heck of a lot easier. Can you sell without it? Yeah, you can. But you know what? If you've got it, even if you've got the real high 60,000 foot level understanding of what it is and what goes on, you can have better conversations with technicians and with customers. Parking brakes. Look, some people call this an emergency brake, right? It's not. It's not an emergency brake. It's not going to do you a whole lot of good in an emergency. It's operated either by your hand, your foot, or a button now. And really the whole purpose is to hold that vehicle in place when it's stationary. It's not to stop the vehicle as it's going down the road. So therefore it's not a true emergency brake. You'll play heck trying to stop an automobile at 65 miles an hour. All right, so it's really designed for that vehicle to be stationary so it doesn't roll away and squish something. 3 different types. You've got a lever type parking brake, and this is the one that you operate by hand, right? And the underneath part of that, which you can see in the picture, is attached to cables, and these are just metal cables in usually some sort of rubber or steel sheath that runs to the brakes. And then you're going to release it by pulling up on it, pushing the button, and setting the lever back down. All right, old school, been around 100 years. You've used them. All right, that's a lever type parking brake. No rocket science there. But let's take a look at what goes on at the business end of this. When I pull up on that lever, as you can see in this animation from Virtual Vehicle, when I pull up on that lever, that cable is gonna operate this linkage that's gonna pull these shoes out. These brake shoes, even in a disc brake setup, it's got brake shoes in the middle of that rotor, if you will, the part we call the top hat maybe. And those little miniature brake shoes, they're just parking brake shoes. They get pulled out with some force and they clamp that rotor from the inside. When I put that lever back down, the spring pulls those things back in and the rotor can turn freely again. Okay, so lever operation with disc brakes, we'll let it play for just another second so you can take one more look at it. You see we're about to apply the brake here. Here we go. Shoes expand, stops the wheel. Release it, we'll start spinning again. Okay? Then we've got the pedal type parking brake. All right, this is probably more common now than the lever. This is the foot operated parking brake, and look, it attaches to the cables. It operates the exact same way as that lever. You push it down with your foot. The difference is how we release it. You know, old school, there was that lever that you would pull that would pop the thing up. Now, more commonly, you push it down even further, it releases a catch, and then you take your foot off of it and it comes back, right? Now, so as I said a second ago, it operates the same way as the lever type, right? So it's got the cables in there and it's going to pull on the parking brake assembly at the business end of it. But I want to show you this time, we showed you the caliper last time, I want to show you the drum brake system this time. So this is going to use the same brake shoes that the drum brakes use, but when we apply, it's going to have a linkage similar to what we just looked at. It's going to be a mechanical linkage instead of a hydraulic linkage that's going to apply these brakes in this case, or expand these brake shoes out against the drum. So you can't see the foot action in there, the lever action in there, but you can see the brake shoes expanding out and they'll clamp against that drum. This is done mechanically. When you step on the brake pedal of the brake, that's done hydraulically. Same motion occurs, but we just have to have this operate without hydraulics in case we lose hydraulics. All right, and we got one more type coming up here. The electric type parking brake. What? These have actually been around for quite a while now. They're all a little bit different. I tried to make it as simple as I could. These are the ones where you push a button, all right? They kind of became mainstream with I think Toyota Prius, because you had a parking button now. So you push the button, it sends a signal to a computer that then operates a motor, and that motor will operate some sort of mechanical lever that clamps the pads to the rotor, or in some cases will expand the shoes to the drum or to the top hat. And then to release it, you either pull up the button on some automobiles or you push the button again. This system does operate differently. This is just a photo of a caliper with a built-in motor. So that motor is what's going to apply the regular caliper piston to squeeze the pads against the rotor. Again, every system that uses the electric deal for parking operates a little bit differently. So you're going to need some more information from your technician. If it has an electric parking brake, they may have to show you the components or explain the operation to you in a little more detail than what we have here, because there are a bunch of different iterations of it out there. Here's an animation again from Virtual Vehicle. And remember, if you're a TechNet shop, you have access to Virtual Vehicle. I strongly encourage you to use it. To use it, you got to get in there, you got to see what's in there, you got to practice with it, you got to have the animation ready and available when you're selling to the customer. You can also email these to the customer, and you can text them to a customer. They're tremendous selling tools. In this particular animation, you see us push the button, the light comes on, and it's kind of hard to see the actual action of the piston, but the motor pushes the piston out, squeezes the pads against the rotor, and keeps it there. So we can't move the automobile. We hit the button again, or in this case, we pull the button back, and it just sends a signal to the computer, we want that brake off, go ahead and release it, and it will actually release it with that belt there. Okay, so 3 types: lever type, foot pedal type, and electric type. What goes wrong with all these systems? Well, the brake shoes can be out of adjustment. It sounds silly, but all that is, folks, is that if the shoes are too far in, it takes too much cable movement to push them out to get them really tight. So they could just be too far in. And so we just have a little adjuster in there, we screw it out, and we get them closer to what they have to clamp on. That's all that is. When we say they're out of adjustment, that's all that is. They're too far in. Why are they too far in? Usually wear. Maybe we drove it with the brake on. Not that that ever happens, but it can be. And so we just need to push them out a little bit more. Maybe the drum is worn, or the disc has worn, and that top hat part of the disc. We just have a millimeter too much space. We're not talking a whole lot, but when we pull up on the lever goes a little too far. Or we push down on the pedal, you can just feel it's a little bit, I won't say mushy, but it goes a little too far. Okay, so that's all the out of adjustment is. Brake cables stretch. They'll stretch over time. You know, look, 200,000 miles on an automobile, those cables are stretched. Ask me how I know. All right. Somebody who's really aggressive with that lever can stretch those cables in well under 200,000 miles. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't ever use these brakes. And so the cable seize because of corrosion. Because moving parts, these cables sit under the car. They sit out in the weather. The brake hardware that operates all this at the wheels sits out in the weather. And if we never ask it to move, it'll sit there and it'll build up rust and it will freeze solid. And then we got all kinds of problems when somebody does come along and put it on, right? Because then we can't get it off. So we've got cable seizing, we've got brake shoe assembly seizing. Again, shoes wear, somebody leaves the parking brake on, drives with it on, the shoes wear right out. The electric ones, we get electrical malfunctions. So all of that, the switches and wires and computers and motors and all that can go wrong with electrical can go wrong with electrical parking brake. We could have mechanical issues. Sometimes springs break. Sometimes cables flat out break. Sometimes things get bent by technicians that ought not be doing what they're doing. All right, so there's all kinds of things that go wrong with just a parking brake. The out of adjustment is probably the most common. The corrosion, the seizing is probably the second most common, and the cable stretch is probably the third most common. Everything else is kind of a one-off. What's a customer going to notice? I think most commonly, if they even notice it, is when they put the vehicle in park, they put the brake on, they take their foot off the regular service brake, and the vehicle moves a little bit still. If you put the vehicle in park and you put the parking brake on, that vehicle should not move when you take your foot off the regular service brake. All right? Maybe they'll notice that soft lever, that soft pedal, or it travels too far, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we'll have a light on the dash. You know, with certain systems, if they'll recognize that, hey, we got something wrong with the parking brake system. Most of the time, they don't notice anything. I hate to say it, most of the time they don't notice a thing. And so maybe it'll be on a state safety inspection that you'll bring it to their attention and they'll be, what do you mean? Or they'll go, you know, I never really use that, so I guess I wouldn't notice. But it's part of the safety inspection. It has to be operational in many states. So again, causes of failure. So what they notice is the complaint. You know, you may have noticed when you do put your parking brake on that it tends to stick, or it's hard for the car to go, or you have to pull pretty far back on that lever to really get the car to hold. And then the cause would be, you don't use it, corrosion built up, cable broke, cable stretched, driving with the brake on. You know, whatever that cause might be, technician can probably tell you what happened. All right, and what do we have to do to fix it? Well, we got to put parts in. We can clean and lubricate some components. That's very, very common. If it's just not holding well enough, then we pull those rear drums off, or pull that rear disc off, and we clean up those parts, get the corrosion off of them, lubricate them so they're moving nice and freely, and then we adjust those brake shoes. That's the most common thing we'll do. Other times, yeah, we gotta put new brake shoes in there. Maybe they drove with it on there and they're worn right out. We gotta free up that mechanism because there is corrosion in there, or just debris built up in there. We gotta put new cables in it if they're stretched or they're broken. And look, if it's integrated with a caliper like the electric system, and look, some mechanical parking brakes are integrated with the calipers too. Thank goodness we don't see too many of those anymore. But those of you that are old enough to have been technicians back when we had a lot of those, you'll remember those nightmares. So basically, we got to put parts if we can't just clean and adjust here. In summary, the parking brake holds the vehicle when it's stationary, not when it's going down the road. It's operated as part of the drum brake system with separate shoes and a disc brake system, or it's integrated in the caliper somehow, either mechanically or electrically. And lack of use is a very common failure. And so a lot of the corrosion, a lot of the sticking, a lot of all of that, you know, look, maybe they use it once, it sticks on, and then they wear the shoes out, is all because of a lack of use. Customer may notice it's no longer holding, or maybe they more likely never even notice it. All right, use your 3 C's. Understand just enough. Use the 3 C's when you're selling these, I'm trying to say. Understand just enough that you can ask good questions of the technician and have a good conversation with the customer. Okay, folks, go check with your technicians. If you have any questions, if they can't answer, feel free to contact me, email me, text me, whatever it may be. And until we meet again, keep up the great work and never stop learning.